Let's go through the details now of the Prime Minister and Treasurer announcing that massive package, $130 billion. It is going to be a JobKeeper payment, $1,500 per fortnight. Payments flowing from the 1st of May, but backdated for employers to today, and expected to help some 6 million Australians with that JobKeeper payment. Hopefully keep those individuals in work with a connection to their employer. Let's have a look at who is eligible. Now, this was the question we discussed beforehand with Andrew Clennell. Will it be full-time and part-time? Yes, it will, as well as sole traders and casual workers who have been with an employer for more than 12 months. Employees stood down since March the 1st will have it applicable, and business with 30% turnover falls will also have this payment applied to them. Let's bring in Andrew Clennell now for your thoughts. Andrew, is it enough? $130 billion. We were wondering whether it would go to part-time. It is. Casuals as well. 6 million workers the government has modelled this on. But as the Treasurer pointed out, this is over 6 months. The UK, New Zealand, their approach is a 3-month time frame. This government is really going the longer plan. Will it work?
This is a very important thing for our economy and our society, Kieran. And it's one of the most important things I've ever pushed for as a journalist. And even last week, as I've said, there were many, many people in senior jobs in Canberra who didn't think this was a good idea. And let's not get into too much detail, but I mean, essentially, this is huge, and it's going to save our society, I reckon. I mean, basically, we saw the despair, and we made a point, Kieran, of playing that every day. We wanted all Australians to see those Australians in those Centrelink queues, out of work, through, as the Finance Minister Matthias Cormann said, no fault of their own, the sort of people who would never end up in unemployment benefits normally in Australia, and this prevents that happening. This means that if the government is right and this is a temporary situation, a unique, unprecedented, as the Prime Minister said, situation, we can get out the other side. If you didn't do this, we were going to be nowhere out the other side. It would have been depression land. And that is why this is just so important. Just a fact, too, that I've queried in relation to it, because they mentioned the 30% turnover to qualify. You've got to be down 30% on your turnover, right? Like I said, New Zealand, that's over a month. So it's not over a quarter. If you're down over a month, you just have to prove it over the month and you're there. You can do this, you can keep people in work.
Well, there won't be any shortage of demand for this, sadly, because of what has been such a huge shock to our society and to our economy. But the Prime Minister and Treasurer, and as the PM said, these are new rules. We're not operating by the old rules. And when you're talking about a $130 billion initiative over 6 months, that really says it all. I mean, we were talking about a surplus a month ago, Andrew.
Yeah. I mean, let's stop talking about a month ago, Kieran, because it's just so bizarre. I mean, I can't even believe I was talking about a surplus. Who cares? You know, let's just get people in jobs, and that will be the community reaction to this too. I mean, they lifted the debt ceiling from $600 billion to $850 billion, I think the Friday before last, couple of Fridays ago, so it gave them facility to do this. And if you're talking about potential 20% unemployment, what's the difference between owing $600 billion and $800 billion? I mean, it was terrible we owed $600 billion, but it was still so much lower than other countries who owe about their GDP. And our GDP is $1.5 trillion. So there was that ability to borrow more to do this. And the government would say that's because we had the budget in a decent position. Let's have a listen, if we can, to when I put this sort of situation to Scott Morrison last week, what he said about it.
Will you consider a scheme like Boris Johnson's, where he provides money to distressed businesses so they can keep their workers on the bridge until we get to the other side?
Well, two things. We are already providing money to businesses through the BAS arrangements, and one of the weaknesses of the system that you're advocating for is that it has to build an entirely new payment system for that to be achieved, which is never done quickly and is never done well. and that would put at great risk the sort of resources we're trying to get to people. The best way to get help to people is through the existing payment channels, through the existing tax system arrangements. That was the lesson from the GFC. Of all the money that went out in the GFC, and I'm not making a partisan point here, the key lesson was you must use existing channels for getting money to people, because that is the most effective way for that to occur. To dream up other schemes can be very dangerous.
Even if it means more job losses, Prime Minister?
No, well, I don't accept that at all, and that is not the advice of Treasury either.
And so, Andrew, the Prime Minister is saying that using existing frameworks, that was the argument they made to you repeatedly, but thankfully for the government, for the nation, they've found a way through the tax office to get this done through existing mechanisms, but get the same outcome that you were arguing for day in, day out, and that was for a wage guarantee or subsidy. And so credits to the Prime Minister and Treasurer for seeing the light, for coming around. And I mean, this sort of thing is a fluid situation. It's a massive crisis, a pandemic we've not seen in our lifetimes. So the fact that they were flexible, weren't stubborn, and rejected the idea which you advocated for very strongly, among others who supported you on that. Tony Abbott backed it. It's good that they've come around to that, Andrew.
Yeah, it's amazing. And what it does is, one of the things Scott Morrison's really worried about with the shutdowns is social cohesion. As you can imagine, I know a lot of people watching us now are doing it tough. You know, I know there's a lot of women in particular who are working from home and trying to school at home, and hopefully they've got Sky on in the background so they know what's going on. And this just gives people a chance. You know, this gives our economy a chance. It's better for social cohesion. It means less chance of lawlessness, less chance of all those things the PM's worried about in terms of social problems that a shutdown creates. And the most amazing thing about that, Kieran, was the 6 million figure. I mean, I sort of did the rough sum before, right? I knew they were coming up with more than 100 billion, but I couldn't understand it, because I thought if there are 2 million out of work, and I'll do the sums, that's 40 billion. So we were talking about that last hour. Well, now it makes sense, doesn't it? Because he's saying 6 million people would be out of... He's saying that he's saving 6 million jobs. There's only one question here which remains unanswered, and is a bit of an issue here, Kieran. What happens if we still got the coronavirus problem in 6 months' time? What does he do then?
Yeah, well, let's hope that that's not the case. Andrew, thank you. As always, we'll talk to you soon.